On this episode of Just Informed Talk, massive explosion at a Philadelphia oil refinery just blocks from where the government seized $1.5 billion worth of cocaine. We're going to talk about how it might be connected to the fake news, Russia, and President Trump. You guys are going to stick around for that and much, much more. I hope you enjoy. Hi, I'm Craig, and welcome to another episode of Just Informed Talk. As always, if you guys want to help the channel out, come here, click the big red subscribe button, make sure to bell for notifications. Thank you to everybody who's got us over 200,000 subscribers. You guys are awesome, and we are on the march to 1 million. Plus, hit that like button if you guys like this content and want to see me make more. So, here we are. This is the latest Q post that we have still, May 26, 2019. Still in a holding pattern, coming up on a month, but I think I've said it before that we have stuff coming out every day in the news, and we are continuing to find more future-proving past as we take the news that is coming out on a daily basis and putting it against the years of Q posts that we have, or I guess I should say thousands of Q posts that we have, to put together a picture of what's going on. And that's what we're going to attempt to do here in this episode briefly, because I think there's a lot more to what's going on in Philadelphia than most people understand. And I think it has a lot to do with what we've covered here on the Q board in the past. So we're going to cover that and a bunch of other news stories. We're going to talk about, we're going to talk about a few things. We're going to talk about Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi and the Democrats and how they're pushing President Trump into this Iran conflict, almost celebrating, giddy like school children after they left the meeting with President Trump, where he had said probably to them in the Situation Room that we are planning a strike on Iran. And then President Trump calls it off because he is a rational man who sees the full context of the situation, and there's a lot more to it. So we're going to dive deeper into that. Plus, we have a few more other news stories we're going to get to, so you guys should stick around for all of that. Also, you guys should come here and share these videos on your social media. And I only put that out every time because, look, we all know what's going on with these big tech companies and how they don't want the narrative to get out any other way than their authoritarian message that they want you to have, be force-fed. That's why when you search for a video, for instance, of President Trump's latest speech in Orlando, at the top of the search results on YouTube, which is a video sharing platform, it has nothing to do with news articles or written articles, web page articles at all. The top of that search bar will most likely show an article, as some people have pointed out, from CNN, basically calling President Trump a liar. And that's the authoritative source you're supposed to believe. The same authoritative source that lied to you for over 2 years, trying to paint President Trump as some sort of Russian spy and Russian agent. And then when that fell through, now they want to get him on these completely bogus obstruction of justice charges. These are the people who YouTube and Google and Twitter, these are the people that they call authoritative sources. They're more like authoritarian sources out of some dystopia and some George Orwell 1984-esque nightmare. But that's the reality we live in. And here we go. If you want to know what QAnon the Great Awakening is, please come here, watch this video. I have this up here as well. It's a great start, and share it on your social media. Get your friends involved. Tell them about it. That's how we get the word out. So here's where we're going to start. This was a report that came out recently about a $1 billion cocaine bust in Philadelphia. It was more specifically in the port there. And what they actually took was 1.1, excuse me, I may have misspoke earlier. I think I said 1.5, but $1.1 billion worth of cocaine at the Philadelphia seaport earlier this week. The largest such seizure in the history of U.S. Customs and Border Protection, officials said Friday. A quarter of the drugs seized were put on grand display, and then this is like going into what they showed and how it all happened. But so let's take this in context of some other things that have happened. Here's video of something that happened at the port in Philadelphia. This is pretty insane. But these people were driving and filmed this explosion at an oil refinery in the port of Philadelphia, right near the seaport, where the major $1.5 billion bust was made. So here you have a video of this explosion happening. I'm trying to show it as we go here. And it's just one of those things that you look at and go, this is crazy, right? Well, is it a coincidence? I guess that's really the question that I have. You know, when I see these things, I automatically get skeptical of that happening in such close proximity. So let me ask you a few questions here before we dive any deeper in this. Do you guys remember this story that came out a few days ago, about a week ago, and President Trump starts accusing the New York Times of basically working against our country? Now, this is what leads me to believe that the fake news media, like the New York Times and the Washington Post and CNN and others, that they're not just reporting fake news because they hate the president. I'm actually starting to see a pattern here where it looks like the New York Times and the Washington Post and CNN are being called out by President Trump for committing acts of, I don't know what you would call it, sedition, treason, whatever you want to call it, against our country. And what do I mean by that? Well, you have a major publication like the New York Times releasing this report about the United States ramping up cyber attacks on Russia. Now, what response does this kind of story elicit? I mean, because whatever you want to say about a journalistic integrity, even if they throw all that out the window, there comes a point where if somebody comes to you with information, for instance, and says they have sensitive information about an ongoing operation that they're going to share with you in the hopes that you'll, put that on your platform. Trust me, I've talked to people about maybe not stuff like this, but I mean, I've definitely had to decide not to report certain things because, let's be quite honest, I'm not trying to sabotage the U.S. government, right? And that's the thing that I think people they glance right over. When President Trump goes on and on and on his Twitter, calling out the New York Times, there is a reason for it. And I'm proposing here, I'm theorizing that reason is because these people are not only disseminating information that is wildly inappropriate to be put out there, to be quite honest, especially with regard to national security, but that they're purposefully taking weaponized intelligence from foreign adversaries and printing it on their national platforms in an effort to undermine the United States at large. And you probably are going, well, yeah, we know that. Come on. This is obvious. And then, fine. If you think it's obvious, good for you. But the reality is that they're trying to destroy our country if this is true. Hypothetically, if all of this really is true, then these individuals are not just writing stories because they think Trump's, a bad person who uses naughty words, but then they go watch their, TV shows, their evil, satanic TV shows every night that curse and have all types of debauchery and immorality, and then they come and they act like that they're the most moral people in the world, and that when President Trump says a swear word, it's the end of the whole world. But not only do they have that, but they're actively engaging in practices which are having a real world detriment to our country's national security. And if you don't believe me, well, let's look at these two stories more closely. First of all, we have this major cocaine bust at the port in Philadelphia. And then right after that, you have this massive explosion in the oil refinery there. Now, this comes on the heels of this New York Times story about the cyber attacks ramping up on Russia. Now, what happened shortly after this story was put out? Well, you had one thing. President Trump went off on the New York Times. He says here in his tweet, the story in the New York Times about the U.S. escalating attacks on Russia's power grid is fake news, and the failing New York Times knows it. They should immediately release their sources, which, if they exist at all, which I doubt, are phony. Times must be held fully accountable. Well, now, why is that important? Well, it's important because what President Trump is doing there is he's calling out the New York Times for printing a story that has an incredible, massive detriment and effect on our national security. So these people are literally weaponizing their information to destroy our country. And you could go and say whatever you want about, oh, well, what's QAnon if he's just, well, you know what the difference is? The difference is this. QAnon and the movement that we're working on here and the investigatory work that we do has a lot more to do with exposing corruption within our own government. We're not printing stories in order to start wars with other countries, right? Or to have some retaliatory attacks happen on our country. And if by chance there was some clandestine organization or some government-backed organization who was moving $1.5 billion worth of cocaine into our port and then we seized it, well, $1.5 billion, that's probably about how much an oil refinery costs, right? I mean, I'm just guessing here. We're going to throw out some wild numbers, maybe 500 million to $1 billion. So that might be what you would call a retaliatory, proportional response, I guess you'd call it. But this is what we're dealing with here. And I don't think any of us really know what's happening behind the scenes. But let me tell you what, we are definitely finding out more and more every single day about this and how it's connected to what we're going through now. Obviously, we can go back and read older Q posts. A few things that you want to point out when you think about the drugs and what Q's told us about the drugs and how they have affected our country. It talks about Barack Obama. It talks about MS-13. It talks about why his instructions for Homeland Security and Border Patrol were to release these people into our country and why they effectively helped shape the laws to make it so that people could not be deported, especially those that come across illegally. So you ask yourself why, and Q explains it to us incredibly well, saying that there's a connection between the agency and major drug cartels, right? Who do you think that might have been, right? The clowns possibly working with the drug cartels. I wonder, don't forget about Fast and Furious and what happened with Obama giving guns to the drug cartels and then they turn around and use them to kill Border Patrol. That happened. But then the other thing is, Q asks, who do you hire for a hit? And a hit would be an insinuation to some sort of an assassination attempt. And then if you think about it, what is Q alleged? That MS-13 is involved with these organizations, these deep state actors. They're throwaway actors that they use to get their dirty work done, allegedly. That these individuals are hired for these menial, low-level tasks, such as, committing a murder, which I know that sounds crazy, but it is. It's like the people who are the higher-ups don't get their hands dirty, if you know what I mean. And then you have what happened to Seth Rich. Now, there's just some very crazy circumstances surrounding his death, and these are the facts that we know. He was murdered on his way home one night. The appeared that it was a robbery, but nothing was taken, and there probably was a link to some sort of gang violence, and they still haven't found out who killed him. But then shortly thereafter, there was a murder of 2 MS-13 gang members. And if you think about it, how would you clean up after yourself? If you hire 2 guys from a gang to go do a high-profile murder like with Seth Rich, hypothetically, then how would you basically get rid of the evidence? Then you go take out the guys that did it, and then there's no link back to you and Seth Rich besides those 2 guys who nobody's investigating. They're barely investigating Seth Rich's murder, so I don't know why they would be investigating. If it was 2 MS-13s, they'd probably just chalk it up to that it's some inter-gang violence, right? Because that's what, I'm just saying that this is what these gangs do, right? And then when it talks about Seth Rich again, the complete insinuation here is that there was a hit put out on Seth Rich. That's the theory, but nobody's been able to prove that yet because the police haven't really been following up on that investigation that well. And to be quite honest, everybody involved with the Clintons and what was happening in the run-up to the election, these people just disappeared. There's a list of people whose lives have been lost going after the Clintons and the Democrats. And this is what Q has told us from day one. Okay, we're talking about November of 2017. This is one of the first Q posts. He started posting in October 2017. So this is one of the first things that we were told. And it still is relevant today. Of course, then you kind of tie that into what happened with Iran now. Here's an interesting idea. It says, why is Iran protected? Why is Iran funded by the US? What news about Iran broke drugs? What about WMD? So could it be the Russians that are pushing the Iranians who are into some sort of subterfuge in our country? And that's why, listen, when Q says drugs, what do you think one of the main imports might be for, the type of government like Iran where they are trying to, illicitly make money in lieu of the sanctions that have been put on their country? You think they might be trafficking some drugs possibly? And you think that if we made a seizure of those drugs that cost them $1.5 billion, that their response might be to do some sort of subterfuge inside of our country to maybe disable one of our major oil refineries in the Philadelphia port to give us like an answer to what we did? It's like, if you take what's ours, then we're going to destroy what's yours. I'm hypothetically speaking about a theory here, but look, and then Russia's back in Iran. We know that. So Russia's got the same problem. Russia's got the same problem. And what we saw in South America, I think, might have been a message from Russia in response to this article from the New York Times. And of course, you guys go, why do I use CNN? I use CNN so they can't be like, oh, he's just using non-authoritative sources, right? So it's like, all right, fine, I'll use your own sources and I'll debunk every single piece of it and I'll show you why it's garbage, right? So this all is connected, I think. And if you think back to it, Iran's got no money. So what are they doing? They're probably smuggling drugs and trying to get oil onto the black market, onto any market who will buy it, that a country that's not signed on with our sanctions, or a dealer who's willing to buy it, and then kind of launder it into other oil so that they don't know it came from Iran. But let's say that we hit them at $1.1 billion worth of cocaine. So over $1 billion worth of cocaine. Let's just say we swooped in, grabbed that, then they had some sort of retaliatory response. It's a good question. Here's another story we're going to talk about briefly before we go. You guys can watch this like over and over again. This is Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi, and Chuck Schumer is doing some sort of, the crypt keeper. He's like the crypt keeper dance. It's some sort of dance that you do when you're very happy that you were in the Situation Room with the President of the United States, and Nancy's clapping, of course. It's the kind of dance you do when you're in the Situation Room with the president, and he says, look, we have these bombers that are on track to go and hit these targets in Iran in response to these mines that were placed on this ship, and I don't want to do it, but we're going to have to give some kind of response, right? And they're happy and they're dancing and they're loving life because in their minds, they've just gotten the best political gift they could ever have had. They don't care about the people's lives that would be lost in the airstrikes. They don't care about the lives of the American soldiers that are put on the line when they go and enact these airstrikes and enact these military operations. They don't care about you. They don't care about the American people. They're dancing and laughing and clapping. You know why? Because they got the biggest political piece of fodder they could imagine. President Trump's going to launch these missiles, and then they can go on TV and say, President Trump is trying to start a war in the Middle East, and we're trying to avoid this, and we're the good guys now, and don't look anymore into our criminal activities and our corruption that has been going on since Obama, and how we have undermined the duly elected administration for the last 2 years and tried to destroy our political enemies, and we tried to set him up, and we used an insurance policy, and we framed him, and we blackmailed other people, and we extorted other people. We've done all these corrupt crimes, but now we have a big piece of political fodder that we can use against him. That he launches missiles in Iran, and he looks like a warmonger, and that'll give us a lot of young votes. Those young kids, we can get their minds off of socialism and get it on to hating President Trump's war policies. How was that? That was a little bit long, but it embodies the way I feel right now, because you watch this guy dancing and her clapping and them acting like it's some major victory to start a war in the Middle East. I mean, who acts like this? That's my real question. And Of course, some media covers it, most media doesn't. You'll never see this on any mainstream media news show for more than 5 seconds and without some like hilarious, stupid fluff piece story that has nothing to do with the real reason why they were dancing. They're going to say that, oh, he's probably dancing because he's so happy that they told President Trump he was a mean guy and he was bad for being mean to all those Iranians. And you're like, yeah, I highly doubt that's what happened. They're dancing like morons while we're trying to avoid war and hold the corrupt criminals in our country and abroad accountable for their crimes against the world and others. So, or the world, I guess, at large. So that's what it is. Because right after that, of course, you have President Trump approving the strike on Iran, but then abruptly pulls back at the last second. Thanks, Maggie Haberman. See, I go to all your trusted news sources, so you guys can't say I'm just cherry picking here. I mean, look, so President Trump goes in and says, look, as he says it in his tweet better than I could probably explain it to you. We're going to talk about his Twitter too in a second, but here's what he says. And I'll read the whole thing because I think it's very fascinating. I'll read it real quick. President Obama made a desperate and terrible deal with Iran, gave them $150 billion plus $1.8 billion in cash. Iran was in big trouble and he bailed them out, gave them a free path to nuclear weapons, and soon, instead of saying thank you, Iran yelled death to America. I terminated the deal, which was not even ratified by Congress, and imposed strong sanctions. They are a much weakened nation today than at the beginning of my presidency when they were causing major problems throughout the Middle East. Now they are a bust. It says on Monday they shot down an unmanned drone flying in international waters. We were cocked and loaded to retaliate last night on 3 different sites. When I asked how many will die, 150 people, sir, was the answer from a general. 10 minutes before the strike, I stopped it. Not proportionate to shooting down an unmanned drone. I'm in no hurry. Our military is rebuilt, new, and ready to go. By far the best in the world. Sanctions are biting, and more added last night. Iran can never have nuclear weapons, not against the USA, not against the world. So we're sanctioning them into oblivion. And President Trump had the foresight and the wisdom to see that it's not a proportionate response to kill 150 people for maybe, for any dollar amount worth of technology that's lost. I mean, and that to me is something that we can take and really take that as a good sign, a positive sign that, the strategy, the thinking in the White House is not just this complete annihilation of our enemies at any cost, including at the cost of our own country. There is some calculated thought behind this, and that's what I think that we're up against. And the whole thing with Iran has been a setup from day one. So the fact of the matter is that we're up against something that's way bigger than any of us could ever imagine. And that's kind of where I'm going to leave it. One more thing before we go, I want to talk about here. The 2019 Trafficking in Persons report was just released. This is a must read if you guys want to learn more. But this was put out by this, I believe it was the Department of State, and it talks about trafficking, human trafficking. And you guys should read this report. I've been reading through it a little bit. There's a lot to read here, so 500 pages, obviously. But this is a global report on human trafficking, and there's some very fascinating information, especially if you just read in the first few pages here where it talks about the United States. It gives examples of how human trafficking varies from country to country, and even the United States is named here. And what I thought was fascinating, and this ties back to a lot of missing children cases in this country, a lot of broken hearts and broken families that are suffering because of this. But it says, in the United States, traffickers prey upon children in the foster care system. This is an official report, mind you, from the Department of State, saying recent reports have consistently indicated that a large number of victims of child sex trafficking were at one time in foster care systems. So I'm very proud and happy to say that we are in this country addressing our own problems, and we're not afraid to address the fact that foster care does breed a large amount of human trafficking and child abuse. And we have to be aware of that as a culture, and we have to fight it at every point that we can. So I just thought I'd point that out to you. I'll leave a link to all of this down in the comments, so you guys should go check that out if you want to read through the full thing. But that's pretty much it. A few things before we go. If you want to help out the channel, come here, click the big red subscribe button. Make sure you hit the bell for notifications. Also, hit the like button if you guys like this content and want to see more. Watch these last few videos if you want to get caught up on what's been going on. Don't forget, and leave your thoughts, theories, and insights below. I want to hear what you guys have to say about all of this. So please let me know what you think down in the comments below about all of this. So before we go, a few other ways you can help out the channel. I would encourage you to come here to Just Inform You on Twitter at Just Inform You, the official Just Inform Talk Twitter page. You can have a conversation with me over here. Also, don't forget to check out justinformednews.com, official website for Just Inform Talk. Links to the Q stuff, different news sites, breaking news, and of course the latest videos from the channel here as well. You go check that out. Also, I have a new channel up called Just Inform Podcast. You need to go check that out. New episode just posted a couple days ago. Come here, click the subscribe button as well, and make sure you hit the bell for notifications. Link will be below. You can support the channel here on Patreon, patreon.com/justinformedtalk. There'll be a link in the description. You come here, click this button, become a patron. Your support keeps this channel alive. It's a monthly donation. You set it and forget it. And without you guys supporting this channel, it wouldn't have made it this far with all the stuff that goes on with demonetization, how YouTube's cracking down on all of this crazy nonsense. Please, with your support, I can keep this channel up and going indefinitely, and that's the plan. So I really appreciate your help and support. Also, have a GoFundMe set up if you want to make a one-time or anonymous donation. That helps out the channel as well. So please come check those out if you want to help and are able to. So I appreciate that. Before we go, we do a segment at the end of each one of these episodes called God's Grace is Greater, where we talk about God's grace and how it is greater. And I want to read this to you. It's Romans chapter 10, verses 1 through 13. I have to share it, and then we'll talk about it. It says, brothers, and this is talking about righteousness by faith alone. And I think it's just a beautiful passage that can give us all insight on how we should really look to live our lives. But it says, brothers, my heart's desire and prayer to God concerning them is for their salvation. I can testify about them that they have zeal for God, but not according to knowledge, because they have disregarded the righteousness from God and attempted to establish their own righteousness. They have not submitted to God's righteousness. For Christ is the end of the law for righteousness to everyone who believes. For Moses writes about the righteousness that is from the law. The one who does these things will live by them. But the righteousness that comes from faith speaks like this. It says, do not say in your heart, who will go up to heaven? That is to bring Christ down. Or who will go into the abyss? That is to bring Christ up from the dead. On the contrary, what does it say? The message is near you, in your mouth and in your heart. This is the message of faith that we proclaim. If you confess with your mouth Jesus is Lord and believe in your heart that God raised him from the dead, you will be saved. With the heart, one believes, resulting in righteousness, and with the mouth, one confesses, resulting in salvation. Now the scripture says, no one who believes on him will be put to shame, for there is no distinction between Jews and Greeks, since the same Lord of all is rich to all who call on him. For everyone who calls on the name of the Lord will be saved. And those words, I want those words to speak to your heart. When it talks about, having your, righteousness by faith alone, that's how we attain it. We don't look and judge people and say, they're going to heaven or they're going to hell, or we don't look and try to act as though we know everything. We remain in Christ's glory by being humble and having humility to say that we don't know these things. But all we do is spread the message that Christ is near you, and that your mouth, and that when you speak the word of God and when you believe it in your heart, that's how you will really be righteous. And that's really, that's my message to you guys. I think that we have to remember that if we confess with our mouths that Jesus is Lord, that by that action, we will be saved. And with the faith in our hearts, that's how we become righteous. And the faith through our words is how we gain salvation. And that's really the message I want to share with you guys. And never forget that everyone who calls on the name of the Lord will, in fact, be saved. So that's where I'm going to leave it. I want to say thank you guys for watching this episode. Come here, click the big red subscribe button if you haven't already. Make sure you hit the bell for notifications and hit that like button. Hit it, punch it, smash it, whatever you got to do to let me know you guys like this content and want to see me make more. That's going to be it for me. Thanks for watching Just Informed Talk. My name is Craig. Godspeed and God bless each and every one of you, Patriots.